Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Julianne and I am in the middle of a quest to achieve TBR 0, that is to read every single book on my TBR read pile, which I am interpreting as every book that I physically own a copy of, not ebooks, just the stuff that takes up space, and oh boy does it take up a lot of space. I intended to vlog this month, but things didn't work out that way. A lot of the month was taken up with preparing for my sister's hen weekend. That's a bachelorette weekend, I think, for those of you who are more familiar with American English. And then after that, I had labyrinthitis for the last couple of weeks of the month. So yeah, that was not fun. But it is now June, and I am here to talk to you about what I read and what happened, because I did actually read a lot of books, because when I had labyrinthitis, all I could really do when at home is read and garden. But I didn't really count that as at home because that was outside, and I felt a lot better when I was outside. So, onto the story of my reading this month. It began with a compulsion to read a lot of contemporary young adult books. And I started off just pulling them off my shelves. So the first one I read was Love Shy by Lili Wilkinson. This is actually Australian, I think. This is an import. And it is a very, very quirky story about a girl who wants to be a journalist, who discovers that a boy in her school has been visiting Love Shy forums. Basically forums for boys who don't know how to talk to girls and are very anxious about it. She doesn't know who he is though, because she just kind of catches some stuff left on a computer, and so she sets out on a quest to find out who he is because she thinks she can help him and write about it for the school newspaper or a better newspaper. She's a very strange, interesting, hard-headed and stubborn character, and I think a lot of people would find her very fun and interesting to read about. Then I finished my first non-TBR book of the month, and that was The Gifts That Bind Us by Caroline O'Donoghue. This is the second in the Gifts series, which began with All Our Hidden Gifts. I listened to this on audiobook and I really, really enjoyed it and could not wait to listen to the third one, so I popped a hold on at the library for that straight away. Then I finished Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. This one I'd actually attempted to start before. I'd picked it up, read the first few paragraphs, and then thought, actually, I'm not in the mood for this right now, I'm going to read something else. But I did eventually pick it up and I really, really enjoyed it. It's a powerfully written story of a man and a woman who meet in a bar one night, and despite the fact that she already has a boyfriend, they feel this really powerful attraction to each other. They become friends and eventually admit that there is more going on and become a couple, but then he witnesses some awful violence and gets really kind of caught up mentally in what it means to be a black man in Britain today, and this disrupts their relationship and makes it really difficult for him to go back to the way things are before. And yeah, it was just a really beautiful, compelling depiction of a relationship kind of starting, blossoming, and then having this big hurdle that can really, really disrupt everything. It gives real insight into what it must be like to be someone who lives under those conditions, where their peace and their happiness can be disrupted by factors totally out of their control and that have nothing to do with the choices that they make as a person. I think the blurb puts it really well. At once an achingly beautiful love story and a potent insight into race and masculinity, Open Water asks what it means to be a person in a world that sees you only as a black body, to be vulnerable when you are only respected for strength, to find safety in love only to lose it. Beautiful, beautiful book. Then I decided that I was in a contemporary YA mood, and I got out from my shelves, I went through all of them and I pulled out all of the contemporary YA that I had, both hardback and paperback. I ended up making 2 piles. I found I had about 24 like kind of straight up, or like occasionally like doing something fun like a sort of time slip, contemporary YA, and then like 14 thrillers. So I made them into piles to pick from to make it easier for myself, and I actually swapped them out with where I had a lot of like hardback fantasy books. I put the hardback fantasy books on the bookshelf where they look beautiful and glorious, and then put the paperbacks in a big pile. I really enjoy it because I have this big pile of contemporary YA that I can just pick from whenever I need a new book. If I don't feel like the burning desire to read something else right then. It's really fun, either reading things quite quickly because they're easy to read, or deciding that actually they're not for me, maybe right now or maybe forever, and deciding to DNF them, so do not finish, for those of you not familiar with book community online lingo. Anyway, so I did that, and I posted a picture of it on Instagram and said, you know, let me know what you thought of these, if you've read any of these, and some people come back to me, and so they inspired me to read a couple more of the books. And some people replied, so I've sort of got their kind of like pick outs and recommendations, and in some cases like anti-recommendations, like books they didn't like, so that was really fun. But anyway, the next one I decided to read was Tape by Steve and Camden. This is a proof copy, and I love the design of it. It's like a cassette tape on both sides. I think that's really cool. I don't think I was sent this proof copy because it's from HarperCollins, and I was never on the HarperCollins list when I was a prolific book blogger. So yeah, I think this was somebody else's, and they gave it away for other book bloggers to read, because we always used to like pass proofs round to give more people the chance to read them, especially for books that we really liked. So yeah, I think someone passed this to me, and I was really intrigued by the premise. It's about a girl who discovers a tape with the belongings of her late parents, and she starts listening to it, and she thinks she hears her father's voice on it, and there's sort of a mystery going on, but then also at the same time you have the perspective of her father, who is recording on the tape, and him going through his everyday life and everything he's going through then. I was kind of expecting it to be a bit more like magical realism-esque than it was. It didn't have so much interaction between the father and daughter as I was expecting, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. It's a very quirky premise, but I enjoyed meeting the characters and it was fun. Then from that pile, this is what I meant when I was like, some of them are a bit different, you know, there might be some kind of historical time slip stuff going on. And that's because I read this, Valentine Joe by Rebecca Stevens. I enjoyed this a lot. It's a very, very little book from Chicken House, who I discovered I was on the blogger list for briefly for a couple of years, but not when this one came out. It was after that, so I think I must have got this one secondhand as well. This is about a 14-year-old girl who goes with her grandfather to Belgium to visit the graves from First World War, because they had a relative who is buried there, and her grandfather's like ambition is to see them. And along the way she discovers the grave of Valentine Joe, who was one of the youngest soldiers to die during the war. He was only 15 at the time. But after that she finds strange things starting to happen. She starts to look out of the window and things are not as they appear. She hears noises which are there one minute and gone another, and then before she knows it she's in a time slip situation where she's in the middle of the war and she meets Valentine Joe and they have a little romance, but then suddenly she's like a few days or weeks later and just time keeps jumping around, but she gets to know his story. It also relates to a personal bereavement that she's gone through after her dad passed away, and it was just such a lovely story. Such a great way to tell the story of someone who a lot of people might not know about. Then I finished listening to Death in the Spotlight by Robin Stevens, Rebecca Stevens. Was I just in a Stevens mood? Who knows? Death in the Spotlight is the 7th in the Murder Most Unladylike series. I love this series so much. The stories are just somehow comforting despite being about two girls investigating murders. In this one, our intrepid duo, Daisy Wells and Hazel Wong, are not back at school quite yet after the traumatic events of the previous book, but they are staying with Daisy's uncle, who has had enough of them being underfoot, and so they get sent off to be part of a theatre production of Romeo and Juliet. But obviously while they are there, a murder happens because these two girls just cannot help but find themselves in the middle of murder mysteries, and they set out on a quest to find out who did it, but things quickly escalate from there. I loved this so much. I adored the descriptions of behind the scenes of the theatre and all the characters they meet there, and I really enjoyed how the dynamic between Daisy and Hazel has changed as well over time, just lovely. I believe the next book they are back at Deep Dean, their school, so I'm really excited to see what they get up to there. Absolutely love this series so much. Then I read a book which isn't like officially YA, but it's in that wheelhouse. It is about a 18-year-old girl in Northern Ireland who is waiting for her exam results and gets a job and persuades all her friends to get a job at the local shirt factory. It is 1994, which means that things are still quite bad in Northern Ireland. If you don't know about the whole history of the Troubles, please do look it up. If you are a fan of Derry Girls, then this is set in the same time period, although the characters are all older. They're looking forward to their futures and going to university. And Maeve, our main character, has got a place at UCL in London, and so she's hoping that she gets the exam results required to be able to go there and get the hell out of this situation that she is currently in. Like, she feels like she is too big for this little town and life there. What I really loved about it is it's got so many normal things in it, you know, like everyday teenage girl experiences like friendship, romance. There's a lot of class issue stuff there where Maeve is from a poor background. Her mother actually got into university and went but came back after a term, and her family don't have a lot of money, and so she struggles sometimes to relate to one of her best friends, Aoife, who is from a much more well-to-do family, and they have high expectations of her. Maeve is also struggling to deal with the death of her older sister, and at the same time as all of this, you've got people being bombed, all of the horrible violence going on, just completely disrupting her life. And yet at the same time, she has all these like coping mechanisms and ways of being, and, you know, she describes just sort of these things that you have to do in order to try and stay safe, but also at the same time she knows that there is no such thing as safe while all of this is going on. And it's kind of matter of fact, and also aware that so many people outside of Northern Ireland don't have to deal with this situation. She is resentful of both English people and people in the Republic of Ireland. It's just such a horrible situation, and it really throws you into the middle of it and makes you realise how stressful just getting through the day must have been. At the same time though, it is also quite funny and it is charming, and you will just fall in love with Maeve and her friends, and the whole kind of setup of the story is just delicious and super interesting. I enjoyed this enormously, despite also being quite difficult at times to read. When I wasn't reading, I was lying in my bed listening to the Books Unbound podcast. I decided to go back to the very beginning and listen from the start, catching up on all the episodes that I missed before I started listening at like episode 100 and something, 200 and something. I'm not actually sure when I started listening. At some point I'll be like, this sounds familiar, and I'll know. Or they'll say like, we're switching to video podcasts, and then that will be easier because I can start watching it on YouTube, and then I will clearly be able to see where I got to. But yeah, I'm listening to it through my podcast app at the moment, really enjoying it. It's so interesting going back and kind of, like, I know how the podcast works now and all of like the things they tried in the early days. Super fun, really enjoying that. Maybe I should try going back and listening to a couple of early episodes of some of the other podcasts that I've listened to for much longer. That could be fun. But anyway, not right now though, because I've got loads of audiobooks I've earned. Anyway, they started mentioning some books that I have on my TBR. I didn't feel like reading all of them, but then when they mentioned this one, The Storied Life of AJ Fikry, this is a proof copy again. Don't think this was originally my proof. I think someone gave this to me, but who knows at this point. It's it's for quite a long time ago. This proof is from May 2025. It was for the paperback release. I think it says repackaged and retitled to reach the widest possible readership. So I think it was out actually much earlier than that. But anyway, yeah, they mentioned this and I was like, oh, I'm intrigued. I might actually read that. But this was as a recommendation. It wasn't just like a casual reference like some of the other references. You know, this was like specifically like, I think you should read this book, Ariel said. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun if every time Ariel or Raylene recommend a book in one of these old episodes and it's on my TBR, I read it. So that's what I did. I read this and I've been pulling out other books they've mentioned. So far there are only 2, but I'm sure there are more to come because I'm still quite early on in the episodes. I think I'm like on episode like 25 or something. So yeah, I'm sure that I will find many more books that I own on my TBR to read. But yeah, it was really fun. I really enjoyed this. It's a very sweet, cute story. Although some quite kind of harrowing, difficult things happen to the characters, I feel like the vibe, as Ariel describes it, is just overall quite like cozy and comforting, and it's just an uplifting story. It's about a bookseller called AJ Fikry. He's like what I would describe as quite a typical literary male bookseller. He's very grumpy and very judgmental about books, and he knows what he likes and he knows what he wants to sell, and he's not interested in anything else. But his whole life changes forever when a baby is left in the bookshop, and he falls in love with her despite his intentions not to, and ends up adopting her and becoming a father. And so it's his life, but it's also her life and the lives of the community around them, and it sort of just kind of shows you like little episodes from their lives moving forward, and it's really lovely, and I found it a lot of fun. Then I finished The Vagabond by Colette, which had been my bag book for a little while. I really enjoyed this. It is a beautifully told story about a recently divorced woman who is a vaudeville performer. That's how it's translated, but I think in like a more British English translation, which I believe does exist, and I'm quite interested to read because the translator of this actually does a whole bit about how this is a deliberately like American translation where he's used a lot of American English, and that the only other translation at that time was a very like British one, and I just think that's such an interesting concept of like the 2 different forms of English, and trying to like translate the book for their intended audiences ended up with like such variations in the text. So yeah, probably really want to read the British English version now. Like, she's, what's the best way to put it in like British English, like a music hall performer? It is the early 20th century, and she is basically doing this as a way to make a living because she doesn't have like any other income. It seems like she was like a fairly middle class, like educated woman. There's references to her writing at various points in the story, but her husband broke her heart, kept having affairs, kind of enlisted her to support him in having affairs, and in the end she had enough and she decided that she was done with romance. Done forever. But over the course of this story she starts to fall in love, and then she starts to question everything, you know. What is more valuable to her? Romance? Can she truly love again after her previous experience she's had? And is it worth giving up her independence and her self-reliance? And does this potential future husband have her best interests in heart? I really loved the descriptions of kind of backstage at these theatres and all the other performers. I think it was just gorgeous. There's also some lovely nature descriptions in this as well. Every time a view out a train or something is described, it is just gorgeous. And I also love the kind of domestic details as well, like what Renee's apartment's like and the furniture she has and things like that. Just lovely. Enjoyed it so much. Then I read the first of 2 poetry collections, and this is Mothersong by Amy Acre. I thought this was absolutely gorgeous little collection. I enjoyed it so much. Most of the poems relate to either motherhood or being a child, or kind of famous mothers and their stories. It was just really interesting and a great subject for poetry. Some of the poems were about famous mothers and they kind of reminded me of The World's Wife by Carolyn Duffy. Others were so intensely personal and full of details that were just so vivid. I found myself reading some of these poems out loud whilst kind of walking around the house, trying to get my brain to not feel dizzy whilst indoors. I enjoyed it so much. It was just a brilliant collection, would recommend. Then, I don't know, I was just feeling random. And I was just thinking about what was on my bookshelf. I didn't even look at them, and I just somehow got the compulsion to read Meowmorphosis. And what's really funny is that I just listened to an episode of Books Unbound in which Raylene bought a copy of this. It is really short. It's from the same people who bought us The World in general, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, quirk books. It is a mashup of the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka and cats, just as a concept. Instead of turning into a cockroach, he turns into a cat. I can't really say any more than that. It is what it is. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah. I laughed. There's a kind of biographical note section at the back, which is like a mashed up version of the Wikipedia page of Franz Kafka, with just like silliness and sarcastic comments thrown in, and I enjoyed that a lot as well. In fact, I may have enjoyed that more than the actual Meowmorphosis story, but like I just kept reading bits to my partner. It was really fun. Then I read this little poetry collection by Cyril Wong, which a very confusing Reddit post suggested that is pronounced Oneiros. I don't understand most of the comments, but Oneiros is the one I do understand. So there we go. That's my best attempt. I apologise if I have just butchered Greek. This collection is themed around dreams, so every poem is like a daydream or a night dream, I guess, and they range in length and topic, but they all had this kind of very surreal, dreamlike quality. It was really, really interesting to read. And then finally, I finished my sort of light non-fiction book that has been on my currently reading pile for the last couple of months, Star on a Shoestring, A Guide to Conspicuous Thrift. This is a book about thrift shopping in the 80s in the UK. It is a old book. Someone I follow posted it on Instagram, like a copy that they had, and I was like, that sounds great. I bought a copy off the internet, and it is great. It also makes me absolutely sick thinking about all the amazing vintage clothes that people had access to in the 80s for so cheap. Like charity shops having dresses from the 20s and 30s? What? Now we just get like Shein, Primark, it's terrible. You know, like the best we can get now really in charity shops is like high-end high street and occasionally designer. Like that's what I tend to go for, high-end high street. I feel like the price is the most reasonable for that kind of stuff. And it's better quality than all the Primark stuff, but wow, really, my God. Like, there's just so many just casual references, like 20s beaded dresses in the charity shop. Wow, what happened? Anyway, what I think this book was great for was inspiration. It's got so many ideas for like upcycling clothes or making alterations or what to look out for, how to style things, how to wear things. You have to take the styling recommendations with a pinch of salt because it's from the 80s, so it's imagining like you'd want to style things in an 80s way. And sometimes there is like a bit of snobbery and a bit of kind of presumptions about how you'll want to style things. But anyway, despite the extreme jealousy that I felt upon reading this book, I enjoyed it a lot, and I think it'll be a useful kind of reference book to have around for the future. I especially loved that there were like patterns for knitted elbow patches in here. Great. So there we go. That's all of the books that I finished reading this month. I read 2 library audiobooks and I think a possibly record-breaking 11 TBR books. I'm so pleased with that. I hope you enjoyed watching me talk about them all. Please keep watching for future updates on how this project is going, and let me know in the comments if you read any of these books, what you thought of them, and how your TBR 0 projects are going if you are on one. Thank you so much for watching. You'll see me again soon. Bye!